Okay, so that's the picture in the first instance. Now, Christensen and Rayner also did something else which is really very interesting, and that is that they said, if we're talking about performance here, you could actually think of this axis as being a kind of a measure of customer satisfaction. And the reason for this will become clear in just a moment. So just keep that in mind, and I'll come back to it. There are 3 or 4 things going on already before we move on from this first picture. The first thing is that there is an opportunity to take advantage of improvements which are moving us from underserving to serving the customer at the appropriate level. So as compared to our competition, could we move up the curve so that we are not underserving the customer? The underserving would be where the red line is below the blue line. Remember, this is the customer's expectation, and that's what we provide. So where the red line is below the blue line, we are underserving the customer. So there's an opportunity there. When we talk about threats in the organization, one threat is we don't provide products that are good enough for the customers as compared to what they need. Another area of opportunity is where there is overserving going on in the market. Now, if you are the company doing the overserving, this is where the problem starts to manifest. So for example, if you took a company in the mobile phone industry, there's a company called Doro, which is, you can look up online, D-O-R-O. They looked at the mobile phone industry, and they realized that for the so-called silver segment, so 60 plus, people were getting phones, mobile phones, which they couldn't use. So if, for example, they were hard of hearing, if their eyesight wasn't as good as was previously, if they suffered from arthritis or dexterity issues with the phone, then using something which has got a very small QWERTY keyboard, or even a keyboard that's on a smartphone where the letters are very close together, becomes very, very difficult. And also all the functionality that is provided on this part of the curve. So if I just make a dotted line above the blue line, for that particular segment, let's imagine this customer is the silver segment customer. Everything above here that most mobile phones would offer is in fact just too much. So I have an example with me, which is this. This is actually a Doro phone, so this one here. And you notice that it's a clamshell type phone. And if I open that up and show it to you, what you see is that it's got a big screen, and it's got a very, very simple interface. Those numbers and letters are quite far apart from each other, and the idea is that this phone could be used by somebody who's got dexterity problems. You'll have to take my word for it that the ringer is extremely loud, so if the phone actually goes off, it's very loud. The speaker is very powerful, so that if I'm talking on the phone and I'm hard of hearing, I can actually turn the speaker up to a level where I could definitely hear it, even, for example, on a subway or on a train. The screen is quite big, and it's very, very bright when it's switched on. And then there's a number of other things about this, but also, in particular, the clamshell, which is a kind of a retro, nowadays a retro piece of functionality, was designed for the silver segment precisely because people knew that once they've closed the phone, they've switched it off, which was a problem if you think about using a phone where you push a button and you don't push it correctly, and the phone call remains on, and so the meter keeps running, as it were. So the idea with this is once you've closed it, you've actually stopped the meter running. So that's an example where somebody's come in with something which is down here. It's cheaper. You've made some trade-offs. The attributes of the product have been actually marched back down to some extent to provide a functionality which maps more closely with that particular segment. So there's a possibility of taking advantage of creating opportunities where you see the general market is not actually mapping to a particular segment very well because they're overserving them so badly, and therefore you can come up with a product which is disruptive. And Doro have been very successful.